Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Last week, Tuesday to be precise, President Trump was with several of us in the Roosevelt Room at the White House, and he declared that this tax cut that he was proposing was not for the rich, that it was all for the middle class. And he said that not once but several times. The next day, he said, quote, "I don't benefit. I don't benefit. In fact, very, very strongly, as you see, I think there's very little benefit for people of wealth," end quote. This amendment is a truth test amendment to determine whether those statements, which appear to me to be false and misleading, are in fact truthful. As with the health care claims that we would suddenly have a healthcare system that would cover everyone and would provide better coverage and less expensive coverage, reality did not comport with the claims that were made. And I think that the tax cut proposal, as best we can determine, appears to not be any of the things that President Trump says are in it. This is particularly important with regard to whether the President of the United States benefits personally from this tax cut proposal, and whether it is about enriching America and American jobs and the American economy, or is about simply enriching him and his family. Before we consider even a penny worth of tax breaks for the wealthiest few in this country, I think the American people have a right to know about whether the plan is about self-enrichment or about gains for our entire country. If you're a middle-class family, we learned only within the last several days that one of the principal authors who was with us last week at the White House meeting has said that he, quote, "cannot guarantee that taxes will not be increased for middle-class families. The guaranteed tax breaks are reserved for the top 1% and large multinationals, including Mr. Trump." Now, because we do not have the Trump tax returns that he promised at one point he would provide, and we do not have the documents concerning the operations of his many businesses, we have only the analysis today from the New York Times, which found that Mr. Trump could save more than $1 billion himself under his tax plan. The Times based that analysis in large measure on only 2 pages of Trump tax returns that were disclosed from several years ago. Never before in the history of this country has a President of the United States stood to gain so much personally from something that he has proposed. We don't know whether the benefit that he will get will be bigly or just huge until we end the cover-up of the tax returns. This tax plan offers only limited clues, but repealing the tax on estates, which currently applies to only 2 out of every 1,000 estates, would appear by itself to provide over $1 billion for the Trump family. Nixing the alternative minimum tax, meant to make sure that even the wealthiest few with the cleverest accountants have to pay at least something for our national security, would be a windfall for Mr. Trump. We know from his 2005 return that had it not been for the alternative minimum tax, he would have actually paid a tax rate of a little over 3%, akin to what is paid by the poorest half of Americans, and that he would have saved by this provision alone about $30 million. Then there's a loophole that is tailor-made for Mr. Trump that is the pass-through provision, which appears to be helping small business but is actually designed to help those at the top. So this amendment provides in full that the IPAB would not be repealed until we have the documents that some of us have been seeking for some time concerning Mr. Trump's returns, so that we can determine, is the benefit for him or is the benefit for America? Are the claims that he will not benefit at all true, or are they false, as the data would appear to indicate? In addition, we have the concern about over $2 trillion added to our national debt. all matters that justify approval of this amendment.
All time has expired. Mr. Reich, you recognized?
Mr. Chairman, I make a point of order to the amendment because it's not germane to the amendment in the nature of a substitute. The amendment violates House Rule 16, Clause 7, because it makes the bill dependent on an unrelated contingency, clearly a different subject matter.
Thank you. Does the gentleman offering the amendment wish to speak on the point of order?
Chairman, I do wish to speak on the amendment. I think it is time to end the cover-up that has occurred here, and I would yield to my colleague, Mr. Pascrell, who has some other observations about why this amendment is appropriate. All we're saying is don't enact this repeal until such time as we have these documents. It goes directly to the effective date of this legislation, so I believe it's very germane. I yield to Mr. Pascrell.